Commissioner Potočnik, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends and colleagues, welcome to Norway House and welcome to Science Business Conference on Eco-Innovation. Welcome to you who are here physically and all of you out there watching by webcast. It's a great pleasure and honor for us to cooperate with the science business. We've done so on numerous occasions in the past, and I can promise you we'll continue to do so in the future. In April, in this very room, we had a conference on CCS, carbon capture and storage, an issue where, you know, innovation in the true sense of the word is a key component. It's always a great pleasure and honor to cooperate with science business. And to me, the most intriguing part is the comprehensive approach of science business, linking innovation and science to policymakers and demonstrating the need for an appropriate policy framework on the one hand, and to business and industry, to companies, to sustainable economic solutions on the other. And at the end, we all know that it's the successful mix of those components that deviates from failure and success. From our own country, as you know, Norway is an integral part of the single market. So the action plan of the Commission, everything we do in order to make Europe more competitive, we're an integral part of that. Another element is that through the EEA and Norway grants, the 1.8 billion that we submit to 15 member states in order to reduce social and economic disparities, innovation, green growth is a key element. So from a variety of angles, if you like, we're extremely pleased to host you here. And I'm extremely pleased to hand over the microphone and the further proceedings in the best of hands, in the hands of Richard Hudson, CEO and editor of Science Business. Richard, you are now in control.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Well, welcome to those of you here and to those of you online. This is going to be an interactive discussion. In fact, some of you online have already sent in questions. So we are already getting some in, and it wouldn't surprise you if those who sent in earliest get their questions asked first. So that means if you'd like to have your questions answered, put them in now. I'll give you two addresses before we go further. One is an email address, live@sciencebusiness.net, live@sciencebusiness.net, or if you're au fait with Twitter, hashtag EcoActionLive. We were very original on that, Mr. Commissioner. Please, questions come in. Now, I should say a word at this point as to what we are doing. First of all, as mentioned and advertised, we're talking about how to harness R&D and innovation for the green economy. This reflects the fact that the Commissioner has taken several initiatives over the past year to make that happen. One is the announcement of a resource efficiency roadmap, and the other is the announcement of an eco-innovation action plan. You're pretty good at hashtags too, and there's more. So what we're trying to do here is talk with you about exactly what does this mean and what is the link to innovation between these issues. Now, with me on the panel here are some of the members of our Science Business Innovation Board. That is a not-for-profit think tank that focuses on innovation policy. And I'm delighted to have on the stage with us David Eiton, who is the Group Head of Technology for BP. Beside him, Tor Land, the Director of Eco-Imagination, EMEA, for General Electric. Beside him, Edward Astle, the Pro-Rector of Enterprise for Imperial College London, and John Vasello, the VP EU Affairs for Microsoft. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And most of all, thank you, Mr. Commissioner, for coming. Now, we have done this before, 5 years ago, when you had your prior mandate, and you were at that time the research commissioner. So actually, I suppose it shouldn't be a surprise that you somehow connect innovation to your new portfolio as Commissioner of the Environment. But thank you for coming. And why don't we just begin by elaborating on that point a little bit more. What on earth has innovation got to do with issues like recycling and water safety and purity and all the rest of it? I thought it was about regulation.
No, it's not. Good day to everybody, first of all, and thank you, Richard.
All right, go ahead.
It's not just about regulation. It's much more than that. But I think I have to start the story with the big story where all the stories today in Europe start. So you know that we are still struggling. It looks a bit better now with the financial and economic crisis. Many are talking now also about that this virus has spread to the social crisis, even political crisis. And I think we simply have to look at the roots where the problems are and how the problems should be addressed. I personally believe that a lot of problems are connected to the question of sustainability. Not sustainability in environmental sense, but sustainability in a broader sense. Are the profits in economy or financial sector sustainable? Is it sustainable that you do some of the transitions which are absolutely necessary in a way that you don't take so much social interest into account and so on? These are the real questions, I think, which we should not ignore. And in the core of that, it's absolutely the questions how actually we are addressing all of those factors of our life through more longer-term vision, or we are more short-term orientated. I'm a bit afraid that this short-termism, which is determining our lives, be it political, be it business and so on, it's at the core of many of the problems. So that actually it's not allowing us that we would organize ourselves more sustainably. Even if you would remove today the financial problems from Europe, we would absolutely still face with the problems of the competitiveness of European Union. Also due to the factor that globalization has happened, some of the answers which are connected to the restructuring were not delivered. And I could say that I'm a lucky guy who was before responsible for science and research, where a lot of answers to those questions lie, so knowledge economy, knowledge society, and so on. And I'm now responsible for environment, where again we are trying to put together the consistency among the economic and the environmental story. So this consistency emerged from the fact that a lot of resources, and not only energy or raw materials or water or fish but also the nature of biodiversity, ecosystems, that many of those are already endangered. And many of those actually should be addressed in a different way that they were addressed in the past. So we are calling for the resource efficiency. And we think that this also makes economic sense. So producing a product, using less water, using less energy, using less raw materials, producing a product which can be recyclable makes also an economic sense. But even if without that, I think my message tries to be always that understanding the trends of the development in the previous century, pointing into direction where we are seeing an increase of the population now, where we are seeing many who are emerging from the poverty. There are expectations that 3 billion will be raised from poverty to middle class till 2030, that replication of the age of industrialized world and production which was resource intense can simply not be done on a global scale. And for that, we basically have to change. Of course, innovation in that context plays a major role. It's some challenges simply emerge from this increasing evidence that we can not go on by producing, consuming, and so on. The other is that other challenges are created by the endless curiosity of us as human beings.
Commissioner, if I could, just one number, one factoid jumped out at me from your resource efficiency roadmap. The Commission said that if we keep in the world consuming resources the way we do, by 2050 we would need a second planet to support us. That's pretty dramatic.
I'm afraid that we would need it before, but I'm afraid also that at that time we will not yet be so technologically advanced that we will have the second planet.
We'll see how the Mars program
goes.
Yeah,
I think it's a real problem which we have to take into consideration. So I have some of the whys which I think would be important to be answered. Why don't we have more investment in innovation already? Why are all the companies not working along their supply chains to conceive, develop, produce, access new sustainable products, industrial processes, services? Why don't SMEs constantly pursue efficiency improvements looking beyond the core of their business? Why does big science go into the space or seek the Higgs boson, but leave some of the aspects of the complex terrestrial systems as a terra incognita? Why are politicians not as interested in the state of their nation's natural capital as they are actually interested in their GDP figures? So I think that answers are generally more complicated than the questions, but that the problem underlying all of this is to the extent of which we are locked into the current technologies, locked into the current state of behavior, to our systems, to our ways how markets work, and in our policies. So for me, the very essence of innovation is breaking out of these locked-in systems and thinking. And we have a clearly strong capacity for innovation here in Europe, and eco-innovation applied through the wider economy, it's absolutely an important part of the answer. I would just like to draw the attention that whenever we are talking about eco-innovation, we should not focus only on those sectors or jobs which we consider as green jobs. For example, I don't know, waste recycling or water recycling. We actually, when we talk about green economy, we talk about greening all the sectors and behavior and production all across the board of economy. And I think there is no accident that Innovation Union and the resource efficiency, which actually we are today in this combining, are two flagships of our main structural reform proposal, Europe 2020, a strategy which is designed to ensure this sustainable exit from the current economic crisis. So two answers necessary for the exit of crisis, and frankly, I think we don't have many more answers than those. So I think we need consistency, we need patience, but we need to focus on the necessary structural reforms which are there, which are absolutely the ones through which we can gain improve our quality of life, and on the other hand also gain our economic strength also back here in Europe.
Okay. Before we go on, I'd like to take one quick question from the internet. And by the way, we will take questions from those of you here as well in the course of the next hour and a quarter. Dwayne Schultes from Science Business.
Yeah, thank you. This is
a question.
Yes, we've had a question sent in from a Graham Meller. And it's, Dear Commissioner Potočnik, that would be you, sir. You've expressed a desire for 2013 to be the year of air, quote unquote. Are you involved with any innovation initiatives that will contribute to this aim, and what else is happening to raise the profile of air quality in 2013?
Yes, the answer is yes, yeah. That's the short one. A bit longer is, I have 2 days ago when I was announcing what would be the elements of the future air quality review next year. One of the ideas which we would like to propose is also that part which is linked to innovation in air sector. So we are absolutely thinking that that should be part of the answer, but frankly the air quality policy is extremely complex issue. Whatever you touch that, but I think that we should really stay attentive to that, because we get more and more evidence that actually the influence from the bad quality of air on our health, if we don't care for environment, it's terrible. It's not just shorter life expectancy, it's a lot of diseases which we are carrying with us the whole life, and I think we should be at least attentive to that.
Okay. If I could, Commissioner, one question that occurs to me, and this is you mentioned the competitiveness of Europe
Yes.
overall. Is this whole area of resource efficiency and eco-innovation, is it something that Europe already is competitive in, or could be, or is this just a pipe dream right now?
No, I think it's absolutely in the core of the question of the future competitiveness of Europe in the future. I will try to explain you. In the 20th century, the prices of the composite prices of the resources, the composite price index was falling, with the exception of 2 world wars and with the exception of oil crisis. At the beginning of the 21st century, we are talking about hockey stick because the prices started to raise. And the expectations from experts are that this will continue. So that it's not one event which will disappear and in 10 years we will live in a nice life like we were, comfort life like we were used to in the past. Mm-hmm. So this will simply not happen. Some high prices will stay with us, which means that the business sector has much more to concentrate today from the labor productivity on which they were concentrated in the past to the resource productivity, because it's constituting higher proportion of their cost structure. And they are doing that. They are very much doing that. I'm listening to them and they are very much aware that that's their case. And so that's the reality in which we live, but then we have 2 problems concerning that. The first problem is the lock-ins, which I have explained before. So we are truly locked into a production in Europe which is resource intensive. And some of the investments were not yet returned, and I think it's difficult to move from one stage to another stage which is necessary so and unavoidable.
Lock-in kind of like bad habits.
Yeah, lock-in, no, not only bad habits, infrastructures, business models, financial models, and so on. So you need to change that, how you approach to that, what you finance, what you reward, all those logic. And another very important thing is that Europe is extremely import dependent. We are import dependent on majority of the resources. We import 6 times more resources than we export, and we are major per capita importer of resources in the world. So if you put those things together, then it's not difficult to conclude if you want to be competitive in the future, you need to be more resource productive, and you need to incorporate that in your logic of creating the jobs in the future. Of course, that has an important effect on how you preserve the environment. And that's why I'm very much attentive to that story too, because using less energy, using water more reasonably, producing recyclable, reusable products makes a good sense also for the protection of the environment. So here I see that 2 stories actually overlap, and that building on that overlapping, we should work and understand that working on that and harnessing the innovation potential which we should unlock behind that is really the way forward.
Okay. May I come to the panelists? How do you see this? Is Europe now competitive? Is it a source of competitivity in eco-technologies or resource efficiency, or could it be? David, would you care to begin?
I will do. Obviously, my field is energy, so I think I'd better remark on that. And there are some areas where undoubtedly Europe is leading. A very good example is tailpipe emissions on vehicles, where these are driven down, they drive the performance of vehicles. And generally speaking, what you see around the world is that other nations move towards the EU standard on cars over time, somewhat lagged behind Europe. So they're definitely leading. It's driving excellent vehicles, if you like, in Europe, and those indeed are sold around the world, at least partly because of their high mileage performance. So that, I think, is a good example. Another one is working together in Europe. I'll pick the one of Denmark and Norway. Energy storage is a big issue. Denmark has great wind resources. It doesn't have many hills or reservoirs that are up, but Norway does. And so Denmark exports, when the wind is blowing hard, electricity to Norway, which pumps water uphill. And then when Denmark needs additional energy, that electricity flows back through hydro in Norway back to Denmark. These are good examples, in my view, of working together and being efficient in the way in which we use energy.
Across the Baltic that way?
That's exactly what happens. High voltage DC transport, yeah. So good example. So yes, we do some things well.
Other examples, Tor?
Well, I mean, for us as GE, we are a technology company, and we certainly know that eco-innovation is driving growth. We have, over the last couple of years, built a $20 billion plus business with eco-imagination products. And we know how important the role of innovation is. We created just 2 years ago an open innovation platform to allow startup companies to work with us. And when I look at Europe, I would say Europe has great pockets of strengths as far as technology is concerned. But Europe is not so good in taking this technology and this great science and really turn it into commercial reality. Other regions are a whole lot better. It's, for example, reflected in the allocation of venture capital. In the US, approximately every year, $20 billion are invested into venture capital-backed companies. In Europe, the comparable number is $4 billion. So I think Europe could do a whole lot more to provide growth capital to startup companies and could create a better environment which would allow these startup companies to efficiently scale their new offering, because that's so critical. Even the best startup company on the planet needs some kind of scaling platform which allows them to take their product or their service in markets and geographies they normally can't tap. And in this regard, a global company like GE and of course others can certainly play a role. And we are living this day in and day out with our Eco-Imagination Innovation Challenge, and continue to broaden that platform.
But so this problem of driving startups and SMEs forward, is that something that at the moment Europe is actually losing at? How could this be overcome? Could it be?
Well, the recipe is straightforward. Provide more growth capital and really reduce the red tape small businesses are facing when they're growing their businesses and when they're executing their strategy. Those are two key ingredients which really help move things along pretty fast.
Well, that sounds simple. Get to work, Mr. Commissioner.
Not me. Seriously. Before I was responsible for science and research, and I remember we talked exactly the same issues 5 years ago. So it is something which is very much in our roots, and it's not easy to get rid of those things. But I would say that we have, of course, we have innovation strategy, which my colleague Moira Gegenquin is responsible for. And when we talked about eco-innovation, we didn't want to repeat many of those things which are horizontal to all innovation questions. And with the eco-innovation program, we wanted to focus on the areas which are specific, where we would drive our part of innovation ahead. But of course, if we start seriously discussing about innovation bottlenecks which are in the European Union, this is a different discussion, I agree, okay. But it's not less important at all than the first one.
Well, we will come to some of those specific measures you're doing in just a bit, but Edward, to come back to the competitiveness issue, I mean, you're from Imperial College, which might have a different perspective as a research university on this.
Well, I suppose the first point to make is that I think at the research level, in much of Europe, we are globally competitive. In this space, as we are in other spaces of research. I think there's a lot of evidence of that. And I think it's equally true that actually for the very next stage of trying to get those technologies into very early stage companies, certainly in the UK environment at least, not just through Imperial, but through a whole range of other universities and funding mechanisms, there's a very, very lively market in early stage startups. In fact, there's one of the Imperial Innovations companies, I think, represented here that's now got a pilot plant in bioplastic, effectively, up in Teesside. So that's already gone to the next stage with quite a lot of funding. So I think there's an underlying competitiveness across much of Europe at that research level. I would have to agree that to get to the next stage, there is a market gap. And this was actually the subject of a previous science business piece of work that we presented last year, I think it was, Richard, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that this research identified is an obvious point if you think about it. There's great fragmentation of venture capital in Europe. It's local, it's regional, and then it's national. And there's an issue of economies of scale about how you can then get that scaled up. We didn't find the solution, I don't think, in the study, but we certainly demonstrated that there is a gap in that. The final point I'd make, though, which is And that's, I think, there's policy that can address that. I think there's various things that you have been outlining in your own plans and that the Commission has already got going, which will help to address part of that gap. One example from a different Commission, DG Education has sponsored an initiative under the European Institute of Technology for Knowledge and Innovation Communities. There is one in climate change. It's brought together 5 universities, 9 large companies, a whole section of regional development agencies, and SMEs. It's a very, very vibrant community, effectively, which is looking at both creating talent, developing innovation, and supporting that innovation into real startup companies. That's a policy initiative that is actually working with the market to make it happen. The market itself, my final point, is actually also going to do a huge amount. I mean, your examples, David, are the market at work. The market will respond to rising resource prices. So we need policy, but I think we can also assume that companies little and large will equally respond.
Mm-hmm. John?
Well,
competitiveness from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, seeing it from the IT industry and Microsoft and listening to you, Commissioner, I mean, I can't agree more that a resource-efficient community or society is what we have to create, going away from the resource not being the bottleneck. And one of the things that can help very much to measure the needs and to measure the results, as well as to help improve the efficiency of all systems, is, I think, the IT. The backbone to everything is knowing the facts and the data, collecting it rapidly, getting it, making people aware of what can be done to improve the situation. And I can give you a couple of examples in Europe where there's been these developments taking place. One of them is the awareness side. The Commission itself, your department, the European Environment Agency, has adopted and put in place already since 2 years an IT-based system called Eye on Earth, where all citizens can see the actual cleanliness of the water around them, the noise pollution around them, and the particles in the air quality, and they can react.
What's it called, John?
It's called Eye on Earth, and it is a website of the European Environmental Agency, which is most interesting, and this is my point, it's in the cloud. So cloud computing, at the end of the day, is, I think, the opportunity for Europe, that both for startup companies and for the existing services that we provide one another, Europe doesn't move fast enough into the cloud because of the fragmentation of our national systems and of our regulatory system. But I know that in the Europe 2020 and in the digital agenda flagship, as well as in the greening of the economy, we have that in mind. We have that system that if we move more into the cloud, we will get faster access to data, we will be all linked up together, like this meeting today, actually, which is an excellent example, and I'm very happy to be on it. And the Commission is taking the initiative. One of the first to go on the system was this agency. Other areas which are coming, and coming very fast, are 3D printing, for example, where you can reproduce material by transmitting its components over the internet to a printer that then is fed raw materials and produces a screw or a nut or a bolt, instead of having to produce it by hand or by welding machines. I've seen it happening in Europe, in Cambridge, when you could see something being produced by a printer. All you feed it is the raw material, the clay or the ceramics or whatever you're putting into it. That's another technology coming. Europe can be a leader in those areas. But most of all, I think the green, I lived a lot of years in Sweden and Scandinavia, and I was also responsible for relations with Norway, one of my jobs. I know in that part of the world, being a green economy is already taking root. And we have to get that best practice across more of Europe and make most of Europe aware that there's a big potential for growth. Small SMEs can start their industries without having to invest in any hardware if they go and test their ideas using rented services. And governments can provide that. I think the ECB should be giving credits to companies to use that system to move faster down the road to trying their innovations on the marketplace, rather than having to borrow money from dad and mom and take ages to start. And we're all helping startups in all our different ways.
But if I may ask you, okay, so there's some competitiveness and there's potential for more competitiveness. But then I look at some really obvious examples where Europe fell back, like solar panels. Europe wasn't the only one. but we've seen the rise in that particular area of the Chinese industry, for instance. Yeah. So is this sustainable, the European efforts in this field? What is the risk of what could happen here?
You are talking about producing solar panels, but we can develop new, better solar panels, technologically more advanced, more effective, and so on. So there the stories are practically unlimited.
So we can out-innovate the rest of the world.
Yeah, we have to play on our strength. We can't play on our strength. It's not our strength. It's knowledge. It's good education. Our strength. It's having a more broader sustainable view on the development globally, and I think these are the things on which we should play. And we can't compete with a low wage producing. So that's not our area. But I think that simply there is absolutely enough room of maneuver in which we can find our advantages, and we are. Sometimes we are the best here, and then you move, but the world is changing, and it's changing fast, as we all know.
Okay.
And probably some of those companies in China are European.
Well, that's another question then.
Yeah, likely.
If I may, from the audience, is there a question about this issue of competitiveness? And I also invite the other members of the Innovation Board who are with us as well to join in if they'd like. Anyone want to come in on this issue of competitiveness of Europe's? Is this an area in which Europe could be more competitive, and what should it do to attain that? No?
Richard, could I just mention
yes,
an
please.
example if anyone else is thinking about a question?
Go ahead.
So you mentioned solar panels. There's an example of a business that won a ACES award last February.
From the Innovation Board,
right,
yes.
From the Innovation Board. This is an award for companies, startups across Europe with new technologies. This business has got the idea of combining a solar panel and a photovoltaic cell in one unit, currently being trialled on supermarket shelves of a major retail chain in the UK. That's a patented European technology. If it takes off and it's manufactured in China because that's the most efficient place for it to be, that isn't a problem, provided we've got the protection around the basic know-how and technology appropriately. I don't think we need to be ashamed of looking at the horses for courses in terms of who does what. As you said, Commissioner, we have to play on our strengths, but the key is, can we protect the basic know-how? The iPhone in my pocket would be another great example of that. It's regarded as an American product. The know-how, the added value, the profits accrue to the US, but all the hard work is done somewhere else where the US isn't suited. Well, all of the other hard work is done in the US, which is not in other places than the US. So I think that's again why I would come back to the fact I think we can be a bit more confident about the areas where we are already competitive, while acknowledging there are still some gaps that policy and markets can help to fill.
I saw a hand raised back there. Please introduce yourself.
Yes, Stephen Gardner, a correspondent from BNA. When the discussion started, the Commissioner spoke about eco-innovation as breaking out of locked-in ways of thinking and locked-in systems. But then the discussion moved to the other panelists, and they spoke about eco-innovation more as a kind of incremental process of improvement gradually, you know, to current technologies and current processes and so on. So why is there this gap? I mean, does that indicate that on the behalf of the panelists, apart from Commissioner Potočnik, there's an understanding of what he means by eco-innovation, or is the problem rather that perhaps Commissioner Potočnik is being too ambitious?
Well, who would like to go with that? David.
I'll start because there's an element in the way the Commissioner was talking about timeframes. And the reality is that, at least in the energy industry, the timeframes associated with innovation, turning it into a commercializable product and then deploying it are really quite long. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about solar panels or anything else. It's actually decadal, and when you make investments in scaling up, energy technologies, you are looking at decades and you're looking at many billions of dollars. So time frame really, really matters. And at the same time, once you've built the existing infrastructure, and it doesn't actually matter too much whether it's a vehicle or the grid or a power station, it sits there with all that sunk cost, and the marginal cost of producing electricity or of consuming an energy is really quite low. So the opportunity for a brand new kind of energy supply or even energy consumption device to be better than what you've already got and get people to discard what they've got and take up with a new one, that is extremely unlikely. Extremely unlikely. So it does take decades. And to the issue of policy making, what that means is that policymakers have to make decisions which bear in mind a multi-decadal time frame. And that is not the time frame of politics. There's a real tension here, which I appreciate, I think, in the Commissioner's comments there. So this sense of being locked in and of the very long term to cause change, at least in the sector that I know, is very real.
Commissioner?
Yeah. I think you rightly said in energy time matters and innovation. I think we have a kind of a situation in which we would need some of the solutions faster than we could actually deliver them. But that's pointing to a second part which we are sometimes really not taking seriously into account enough. That's the energy efficiency. Energy efficiency is a low-hanging fruit. It's something where you don't need a lot of time, but when you can collect, and we should do that. So I think that through the energy efficiency, you should basically fill those technological gaps which are absolutely necessary in the development of new steps ahead. The second thing which I want to mention is we are sometimes too much focusing on the energy story, which is absolutely important, to be clear. What I have tried to do in my portfolio is that coupling the story which we have developed between energy and climate, because somehow we got interconnected answers to those two sides of the same coin. I'm trying to replicate that with the rest of economic sectors and environmental concerns which we have in other resources, be it water, be it ecosystems, be it oceans, name it, or raw materials, name it, whatever you wish. I think it's so important that we understand that some of the challenges which we will be facing will be enormous. For example, if we would continue our life as business as usual from now on, there are estimates that globally we will be in 40% shortage of the water. That's 2030. It's around the corner. That's not something where we can really and of course there is not so complex things like you have explained in energy creation, which I understand well. Or if we simply look to the question today of the competition over the land, how many of us are competing for the same land? We as citizens, city dwellers, then transport, then agriculture for the production. Of course, us also who would like to protect environment and so on. It's the competition for the same very limited land. Energy sector is also very seriously now competing for the same land with the production of biofuels and so on. So we need to start to find ways through, because my message, which I tried to convey at the beginning, was simply we don't have alternative. It's not existing. This is the trend which I think that everybody today who is responsible is seeing that it's coming. We can't govern the 21st century in the same way like the 20th century was governed. And these global mega trends are obvious. We are more interconnected and interdependent than ever. It's more of us than ever. We hope that we don't need diseases or wars or whatever, that we would settle those issues. We need to live in different ways. We need to start living in a way that we will respect some of the limits which are existing. And this is perfect and important part of the competitiveness and the case for the industrial innovation. Because that's the driver which actually has to bring and will bring, I'm convinced, some of the answers. I'm just trying to say that it would be good that in Europe we are heading that transformation instead of being pushed into that transformation because of the reasons which I have explained before. Because of the import dependence, because of the price rise, and all those things which are actually, without doing nothing, influencing that we will be less competitive if we do not act.
Well, Commissioner, that was quite passionate. Stump speech there. Thank you. John, you had a comment, and then I'd like to hear something from the internet, and then we'll come back here. Yes.
I just wanted to respond to the question. I think the Commissioner Potočnik is very realistic. He's bringing us to earth with a realism of what's going to happen. And what he's telling us, I think, and our reaction is very much in line with his thoughts, is that we must get out of the boxes that we have been in. And the example I gave of the concept of data and data flows across Europe, going into that new world of how to do a business, will speed up the decision making, will make business more efficient, make use of raw materials more efficient, but it will change the mindset of how to run a government, how to run a business, how to relate to your citizens and to your customers in a direct, immediate way. But we are facing the difficulty of people continuing in the same mode. We see governments remaining national and not taking the EU single market approach. And that's why we're looking forward to the new strategies for the digital single market, where data will flow much more quickly, where the big data that is stored in huge depositories of knowledge in universities, in libraries, becomes common and used by these clusters of universities across boundaries. So we really have to change our mentality to this new world, not only because resources are smaller, but because we must do business differently. So I think we're very much in agreement rather than in opposition on how to deal with it.
Mr. Schultes, what's from the internet?
Yes, just to remind everyone, we are taking questions from the internet and Twitter, and the email address is live@sciencebusiness.net, and you can also send us a Twitter question at #EcoActionLive. And I'm proud to say we do have our first Twitter question of the afternoon. And this is sent in by Robert Hickey, and this is for all of the panelists. Can eco-innovation alone decouple economic growth from the environmental degradation happening enough to address climate change?
I think that's kind of a question of will it work?
And how much will it work, yes.
Yeah, well, that's to you, Commissioner, first, perhaps.
Yeah. I have here the toolbox, and eco-innovation is one in those toolbox. So
is that the back of a napkin there? Or?
Yeah, no, it's seriously, I will go fast through it, but eco-innovation is an important part of answer. Education awareness, market measures, prices, for example, water pricing we have already now in our legislation. Taxes, subsidies, absolutely. We are trying to push through the semester logic, which we have now in Europe, that this would become part of the major governance of the economic transformation which is needed in Europe. So shifting of taxes from labor to a more polluter taxes, or removing environmentally harmful subsidies. Nobody will tell me that in those difficult days this is not twice good, because at the end you remove, you free the space in budget. On the other hand, you stop doing harm. Or internal market, in these market measures, green public procurement. We are working on environmental footprint for products and organizations inside that. That's the market part. Then we have the legislation regulation part. For example, targets, eco-design, eco-labeling. One thing which we are thinking would be good trigger for changes, introducing a ban for landfilling, for example, in Europe till 2020. This is seriously under consideration. We have mentioned it also in our
banning landfills.
Yeah, banning landfills.
Totally.
Yeah, that will move the industry absolutely in the right direction.
What do you do with it?
Huh?
What do you do with it then?
What you do with that? You create exactly the environment in which business knows where to invest. They have predictable conditions. You push the society to recycle. You have the life cycle story there in place, and you do not throw the valuable material where it does not belong. We have today 5-6 countries in Europe which are practically doing that, a bit too much incinerating than recycling, but you have 7-8 countries which are still landfilling 80-90%, so practically everything. So that's lost. That's lost forever, and I think it's extremely important. If you create a kind of predictability, the countries which are today landfilling have more opportunity for jobs. than the others. But I think it's important to understand it that the waste is simply not the problem. That the waste is a perfect economic opportunity if you deal with them in a way like they should be treated. Then, of course, it's innovation, eco-innovation plan, financial incentives, Horizon, FP7, private investments, EIB, and then a bunch of other activities, other financial incentives, cohesion, life plus common agriculture policy, integration of policy, crucial. You have mentioned data and measurement, absolutely crucial, absolutely crucial. If you change the fundamentals of logic beyond GDP, corporate sustainability accounting, if you change, for example, green capital accounting in national accounts, this is then changing the basics, because if you change the basics, then you can change the structures uphill. International cooperation, which is absolutely necessary again, because we are all in the same boat, and from the business there is many times the question, why us, why not all together, because this is important for the global competitiveness. So yes, eco-innovation, but in complex environment and going in the same direction by all.
And how much, Commissioner, but this is going to cost a lot of money in the end.
Oh, it will be much, much more costly if we don't do it. Much more costly. And majority of those things are proven that you, for example, air quality. Of course, air quality costs because you have to, but do you know how much is the cost of the health care? Do you know how much, can we value the life? So we compare those things. And I think we always have to think on both sides. So always we have to think what is the cost of inaction, not what is the cost of action. Because cost of inaction, it's the waking up call. What we do, and are we ready to live a few years less? Are we ready to do that? Fine. If this is the judgment which we will do, and it will be less costly, then it will be a good judgment, but not with me.
Okay. Tor.
I want to emphasize the importance of really a common market and the concept of a common market for fostering eco-innovation. I mean, going back to the energy space, I mean, if you look at the segment of distributed local power generation, combined heat and power generation, highly efficient, low emissions, certainly a great improvement on resource efficiency, a great improvement on environmental footprint. But when you try to commercialize these solutions, for example, as a startup company, and I can talk about this firsthand because I was running a startup company before I joined GE, actually trying to do exactly this. You're not dealing with a common European market. You are dealing with a German market, with a French market, with a UK market, with a market in Belgium. And I think that is really where policymakers and stakeholders could really help industry dramatically if they create a common market where you don't have to always operate under national rules. And when there is a European energy market, we're all interconnected, but legislation and regulations doesn't reflect this. Subsidy schemes, regulatory processes are different from country to country, and this is dramatically slowing down the deployment of innovation. And while large companies have the resources to at least respond to those situations, small companies don't. And as a result of this, they cannot successfully scale their businesses. So, I mean, that's clearly a place where I think our political leadership can help us tremendously.
Let me call on Jonathan Wareham and then to you. Jonathan from ISADE. Is there a microphone here? Thank you. Alternatively, there's one here. But all right, okay.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask the Commissioner's thoughts on some characteristics of a good policy. Let me give you an example. We can all agree that there's a problem with water, right?
You are from a university, aren't you? Go ahead.
We can all agree there's a problem with water, but the reality is I can get as much water as I need on a daily level. So water problems, for me, is really an intellectual abstraction, right? We can discuss it, I can read about it and so forth, but my behavior hasn't changed, right? So my question would be, what are the characteristics of good policy making can actually change people's decision-making or behavior by taking an abstraction and making it a real problem for them, right? And now the obvious thing is, assess lots of taxes so we can make an artificial sense of scarcity, right? And that's something we all know. But can we be more sophisticated than that? And what is your experience in terms of policy formulation?
Yeah. water it's a really important issue, because you basically have to, you're working among two worlds. One is that each of us has the right for water and sanitation water. So each of us should have that right. That's a kind of a human right part, social part. And then it's the other part which you touched actually, how not to use water without having really any kind of any real responsibility in using it. For example, if you look to the European situation, you have countries with totally different consumption patterns. On the south, Greece, Spain, consumption of water for purposes of agriculture, of the total water which they have, of the total reserves, goes even up to 80%. So while in the north, of course, it's, the structure is totally different. So you need to look a bit differently. And of course, their major question is connected, for example, on the south, how you deal it with agriculture. Are the products which are there produced the right products? Should you have to irrigate? And how do you address that? But that's all connected with the serious questions of some people who are, if I use the previous expression, locked into the current life model of that region, of that country. But we try to help, of course, with many ways how to address it. For example, pricing is absolutely one part of the story, which you can't ignore. So in many cases, when you say pricing to water or pricing to nature, there is immediate reaction. But you have to immediately have here the difference between the valuing resourcing, pricing the resourcing, and in water it's absolutely clear that the price should be connected to the consumption of that, otherwise you have the problem. By the way, that's part of our legislation. And we are, in the next years, bound to actually monitor the member states, either they are fulfilling and how they are approaching to that. Of course, each one has, according to subsidiary, their own rights, how to deal with that. Another part, it's, for example, where we are trying to push something, but we'll see how far we will come. For example, when you produce a product, you can design it that it uses less water. Shower taps and shower heads and taps. You can, today, if you introduce a simple standard, which is actually mixing among the water, the air, you don't, as a customer, you don't have the feeling that you get less water, but you use half of that water, basically. That would be a pretty simple solution that you would cut immediately that consumption, which is pretty important consumption, especially in those northern part of Europe, where consumption from families, it's much higher proportion. You can immediately cut it seriously. But these are the things which, so these are the policies which I try to push. Many of those solutions and many of those policies which I'm talking about are in my colleagues' hands, or in the hands of the colleagues around in European Union, not in the hands of environmental commissioners, as you know. Because practically, I'm talking here a lot about economy, I'm talking a lot of business, a lot of competitiveness, and if my colleagues in economic sectors would once start to talk as much about environment as I'm talking about economy, it would be really nice. But I think it's, but the point is that we have to integrate the policies. We have to understand that if those policies, if we go with the policies, better it's prevent than cure, then we will succeed. Because many of policies still, as we have, is, okay, let's do it, and then let's cure it. But when you have to cure it, you know, you are in conflict situation, you have to disinvest. People who have done that in good faith are disappointed, they will of course oppose that, and whenever you have that kind of situation, it's difficult to move. And that's why I think that's the major intellectual change which would need to occur, that we integrate the policies, that we start to listen to each other, and that we respect each other in those policies in a way that we will not be running into conflicting situations.
Commissioner, I think, following up on the water, I think that one of the specific actions that you've done is an innovation partnership for water, a
yes.
public-private partnership. I mean,
yes.
what is that?
Innovation partnership, it's kind of a new model through which we want to upgrade something which is already happening in the research center, in the research area. So we have, for example, joint technology initiatives or other activities which we have shaped during the previous mandate also for water purposes. What we are trying to do now is to approach to that question a bit differently, because we have found out that the innovation bottlenecks are not lying only in technological innovation. They are lying also in how in the business models, in the way how consumers will react and so on. So beyond the technological innovation. And for the first time, we have actually put at the same table people who are coming from the supply and who are coming from the demand side. And we would like that they identify the real bottlenecks of why the innovation in water is not going faster, and to address them in a way that they would actually provide us also at the end of the day with good examples, so we have clear timelines, what needs to be done till when, and through that we would simply like to speed up the innovation potential, but not only technological, but also technological potential in the water area, which is one of the rare areas which was also during the crisis times growing quite fast, because this is an emerging problem and an emerging area.
So this is a very targeted sectoral consultation ultimately that happens, or is it also supposed to be getting funding to do work? Will you be doing this in other sectors also?
It's not so much about funding. Of course, it will mobilize the funding which is existing in various areas. For example, in Horizon 2020 or private, but it is to bring those valuable ideas together, in which people who are working around that sector would start to believe and join the forces and move those bottlenecks ahead. Because we think that there is a major innovation opportunity which is still untapped.
Okay. Question over there. Please identify yourself.
Thank you very much indeed. My name's Nigel Room. I'm a professor here at Vlerick Business School in Belgium. I'm a professor of sustainable development with a long-standing interest in sustainability-driven innovation. And so I'm very interested in the lock-ins that come from our understanding of innovation. And my question might be framed like this. The evidence from looking at sustainability-driven innovation is that it's different from normal innovation. And indeed, the last comments from the Commissioner touch on that by pointing out the importance of looking at the upstream and downstream issues that provide lock-ins. But in the advice given to the Commissioner, well, to DG Research in 2001, it identified some of the differences. It talked there about the importance of context breaking rather than context taking innovation. It talked about the importance of managerial, organizational, institutional innovation to go hand in hand with technological innovation. And more importantly, it talked about the importance of replacing notions of efficiency, which we've heard a lot about already today, with the concept of sufficiency. And if people look at me as if they don't know what sufficiency means, then we have a problem, don't we? Because it was advised that the Commission might think about sufficiency 11 years ago. So it's very slow to get some innovative new concepts on the table. So my question is really to the panelists, what experiences do you have of how sustainability-driven innovation is different from normal innovation? If we can't unpick those things, then we can't drive towards them.
Well, let me take a shot at this one. I'm not so sure that I would underwrite the notion that eco-innovation or sustainability-driven innovation is very different from other innovation. I mean, at the end of the day, if we look at the portfolio of products, sustainability products we have built, they have to meet two criteria. On one hand, they obviously have to create value for the environment. They have to reduce the environmental footprint of the operator. May it be a wind turbine, may it be a gas turbine, may it be a more efficient turbine on an aircraft. But on the other hand, you also obviously have to improve the competitiveness of the operator using this product, because otherwise it would not be economically viable and literally not sustainable. And I think in this context, eco-innovation really is not so different from other parts of innovation, with the footnote that, of course, very often it is addressing infrastructure issues where, of course, as the Commissioner and the gentleman from BP already has pointed out, it is a fact of life that you have a lot of capital in the ground, assets in the ground, and these things don't tend to change overnight. What we certainly firmly believe that if you can accelerate the process of taking a new concept, a new service, a new product through the supply chain and deploy it in a faster manner by simply connecting all the pieces in the innovation supply chain, you could bring these new solutions to market a whole lot faster than we currently do it.
David.
I'll just comment that I think a big difference is the need to understand the system as a whole. Many forms of innovation can be caused by all sorts of mechanisms, including regulation, in a component of the system. But quite frequently, what that can do is push an issue somewhere else and often make it even worse. So what is critical is to understand the systemic impact of the policies that you're deploying. And just to reinforce the Commissioner's assertion about the efficiency side of this, it is a fact, it was established in a paper written, I think, by Cambridge in 2007, that in 2005, the world's energy systems, only 12% of the energy captured at source in the world ended up in useful heat or light or motion or materials. The rest of that, the other 88%, was somehow wasted, if you want to call it that, in the system. So we have a market dysfunction here. You talked about systems. We have a really big market. 88%. Now, some of that thermodynamically has to be lost. You can't convert from A to B without any losses. But not all of that is a thermodynamic or contravening the laws of physics. A lot of that is genuine wastage, and it is the fact that there are all these handoffs you refer to supply. There are all these handoffs in the system and in the supply chain, and you just don't realize how much you're losing in this substation going down and in this one going back up again. There are massive losses in the system, and one of the big challenges, I think, that the bigger the nation or the bigger the group of nations, the more difficult it is to understand the system. Example quickly, if you encourage diesel consumption in Europe, which actually the policies effectively have done for quite a while, and you move it to the point where refiners can't do that, what Europe ends up doing is importing large amounts of diesel and exporting large amounts of gasoline. You can push the system to the point where you have an extrinsic inefficiency which is bigger than the efficiency you cause inside the bit you are trying to manage. So I think the systemic issues is the critical part of your question, for me anyway.
And Commissioner, how would you, sorry.
The smartness of grids and of cities and of, is all about that. It's all about knowing and being as a user able to see these inefficiencies or these losses and try to avoid them by improving the use of your equipment. These inventions, I think, to answer the question, these sort of inventions are the sustainable inventions. These sort of applications that would make your refrigerator on and off when it's needed, your freezer, not use too much energy, and therefore reduce these pulls on the energy system that lose the 70–80% as it's coming to your home unnecessarily sometimes. So I think this is where we should be going to get a sustainable, and Europe is very good at this.
Commissioner, how do you get to this kind of systemic approach to encouraging innovation? It's difficult enough in Brussels to even get the DGs to talk to each other.
No, but I think the gentleman is right, and I think the answer which some of you have stand behind, it's exactly right, because I can tell you that when we have adopted the horizontal innovation new approach in this commission, when my colleague was proposing it, of course we were standing in front of the question, should we try to have this eco-innovation part in that, or do we still have a good case that we produce our own eco-innovation action plan? We decided for the latter.
Why?
But yeah, there are many things, to be honest, which are decisive already in the horizontal. Many things which are decisive and which are basically the bottlenecks or driving the innovation potential and innovation activities all across the board. But there are some for which we believe that it's part which we have to do, which simply it's not sufficient if we go just the way it's like it is there horizontally. For example, we have at the end decided only to go on the 7 types of activities and focus on them and really try to see how much and what we are delivering, because it's extremely important that you don't come with some proposal of any policy which is so weak at the end that in 5 years then you try to evaluate it and you see that fine, it could be better, but something has been probably done. But so you need something concrete enough that you can measure and that you can see that the things have truly moved. So the first was environmental policy and regulation review. So we have already started screening environmental legislation to assess to which extent it supports actually eco-innovation, because it is important. I can tell you that sometimes we have the real problem for ourselves to have a clear overview of all the policy initiatives which are from year to year building one to another. So at certain moments it's important to scale down and at the same time try to keep focus and try to do the things which really move.
Could I ask you more about that point? Have you reached a conclusion yet?
No. We are in the process, yeah. The second, we said that, of course, we will focus on some demonstration projects, on the things which, for example, we have already launched the calls for proposals on some of the activities accelerating progress towards the green economy, business practices for promoting green economy. The third, very interesting, is these standards and performance targets. In next year, we will focus on the development of so-called dynamic standards. So, because sometimes when you propose a standard, in fact, with the proposal of the standard, you are creating predictability and shaping the movement. But then suddenly the standard becomes an obstacle, because dynamic standard would actually mean taking into account, for example, best available techniques or the front runners who would be immediately actually the standard of where the things would need to go.
How do you do that? I mean, do you have like a perpetually sitting standards committee?
Yeah, you absolutely have to evaluate and to have a methodology which is following how the best in the group are. So we are calling it best available technology or BET technology or the best practices. And on the basis of those, you actually design the standard for the laggers, so that you know that this is already existing on the market, that it is possible. But via that, you actually run the whole system into the correct direction. Then it's financing and support of SMEs. In July, we launched a call to establish networks for public and private procurers for the sectors of transport, wastewater treatment, waste resource and recycling, bio-based products. In 2012, this year, we also launched the European Environmental Technology Verification Pilot, so that we would more align the understanding what is actually good from the environmental point of performance. Then network of, next year we will launch a European network of eco-innovation financiers and investors. This is also an interesting thing because we see one of those lock-ins exactly in those areas. Then
again, sorry, I keep coming back on detail. How will you do that? Is this, is this like to be an investment club of some kind?
Yeah, you pull them together, you create, yeah, that's how we work, of course.
Yeah, private investors.
Yeah, no, you have to bring the critical mass of people around the table. They help you create, with the knowledge which they have from their business, that you start to understand what is actually the major obstacle, that more it's not going, more financing, it's not going in that direction, how to support that. And then you actually, via the policy initiatives, introduce that to the changing of the policy, which in reality you have. Then the fifth, it's on new skills and jobs, which is actually 2012 employment package. International cooperation, it's absolutely crucial, and the thing which I already mentioned, this European innovation partnerships. I have mentioned the water, but we are thinking also of potentially some others. But we have already the sustainable cities. It's one of those which is not under me, but I'm cooperating. Then important, it's also sustainable agricultural agriculture, where again we are important part of that. So really what I'm really trying to do is to be present with the activities of all my colleagues and not to overlook that we would not be somewhere left behind. And
so, but you mentioned agriculture. Then that seems to imply that you would also be getting involved in looking at the common agricultural policy in this respect.
Who do you think was shaping together with my colleague Dacian Cioloș most the common agricultural policy? Of course, because we, if you want, in the simplest way, what is the difference between previous portfolio and this portfolio? In the research area, many people agree of many things, but as you have heard the colleagues, sometimes many things are not moving fast enough. In the environment, there is many disagreements, but there are many things which are moved by the environmental policy. In research, it's a lot of money, but you don't really have the policy in your hands, because this is something where policy, EU policy, it's practically not existing. While in the environmental area, you have practically a lot of policies, but not a lot of money. So you are, but there are other, so we have only Life Plus, which is 2.4 billion for 7 years for this financial period, for 7 years. While you have agricultural policy, which of course has to change the perception. In the new proposal, approximately 1/3 of the money, if it will be adopted like it is, 1/3 of the money to farmers will go only if they will accomplish some of the public good which is connected to environment. 1/3. So that's 30% from the first pillar and minimum 25% from the second pillar. That's basically in the current proposal. So that we would understand that this, it's not logical, that it's not automatic that somebody gets direct payment, even if we have to know that, of course, the preservation of the food and the importance of the common agricultural policy, which actually brought stability on our markets concerning the prices, it's a really important part. But what we try to do is really that the farmers would hand in hand work with us, who are taking care for the environment, and that we would pay them in advance, that they protect water, protect biodiversity, protect soil, instead of punishing them later because they are polluting it with nitrates, water, or whatever. That's the philosophy which is now built in the new CAP.
Okay.
And then, of course, you need to work also with other colleagues, but this is important part, of course.
Okay, let's jump to a question in the internet before we come back to the room.
Thank you. We've had several tweets and emails come in about some discussion going on about an impending cut on framework from 80 billion down to 60 billion, potentially all the way down to 40 billion. And the questions are just asking, what would the Commission's response be to a proposal that comes out of the Parliament that cuts framework by such an aggressive amount?
Which framework?
Horizon 2020.
Horizon 2020.
The Brussels speak for the newest R&D program that has been proposed.
Before answering to Horizon, for which I would absolutely fight, as you know, because I was before responsible for that and I believe in that. But before answering to that, I think when we will discuss the future European budget, the most important thing is to understand this is not the budget for European institutions and for bureaucrats here. 95% of that budget goes straight back to the European member states. So it is their budget, which goes under the agreed policies, under the agreed priorities back to the countries. I think in those days, if you would look to some of the cohesion countries, which are in serious troubles, especially in their budgets and investments for the future, you would find out that this is becoming the prevailing part of overall investment in those countries. Because under the pressure which they have internally, because they have to shrink the budgets, under that pressure, a lot of investment money is disappearing from the budgets. And in a way, this money which is today going through the European budget, it's a kind of absolutely necessary investment money for the future fueling back of our growth, which we absolutely need. So understanding the European budget also from that part, of course, addressing it also importantly the question of solidarity or the question of common agriculture policy, which is specifically done via financing it that way. Of course, these are particular questions which are also addressed through that. But understanding that this budget has actually that, in a way, in those difficult times, that stabilization or important development role, that's important part. Because then suddenly you don't think and look only via the angle which is predominant angle of the member states. If I'm a net payer, then it should be low. If I'm a net receiver, then it should be high. But this will not really bring the necessary change into modernization of that budget and basically into having in that budget something which will actually drive European competitiveness altogether in the right direction.
Edward.
If I could just add a comment. In the last few years, post the banking crisis and the era of austerity, the UK government, the German government, the French government have all done a huge amount to protect their R&D budgets. The US government has done exactly the same thing in a very, very impressive manner. While we've been protecting those budgets, the Chinese have been continuing to increase their spending on R&D as the Chinese economy grows. So I think against those models and the underlying theme of competitiveness, which you referred to, particularly in relation to the environment, but it applies to the whole of the European economy, it would be an extremely difficult thing to imagine that there would be a very short-sighted cut in expenditure when other people have found means of making other sacrifices, because that really is at the heart of any competitive economy.
Well, EU politics, we shall see.
Well,
a question in the room. I saw your hand up, and then we'll take another internet question.
Hi, Phil Goodyear from Plaxica, a biomaterials business. David, you mentioned at the beginning of the session a very successful European business, vehicle emissions. That business, fantastic value created. It was investable because there was regulation. Those regulations meant that all of the people in the supply chain knew it was going to happen. It wouldn't have happened. People like Ford and Volvo wouldn't have done it unless there was regulation. In the other areas of materials and resources, without regulation, the alternatives tend to be more expensive. And how can we make those industries investable so that startups can grow?
Anyone like to answer?
Yeah, it's if you look to the where I have it, to the proposals of basically of the World Business Sustainable Council and what is their advice to us policymakers, it's exactly that. So they are actually advising more regulation, more standards, more predictable policy making. And I think that one of the things where I have named it in a way, we should not kill the industry with kindness. I think that's because we should be aware that that we need to be bold enough and strategic enough that we dare to set some of the directions which I think are inevitably seen, via that taking really care that in this transition, the ones who would be in a way I would say penalized by that transition, that we take care for them, because this is important part of the success of the transition. But that on the other hand, that we really create an environment in which I would say the mainstream would go into the right direction. Because for me, that's the only reasonable way to go. The alternative to that, it's lose-lose. It might be a short-term gain, but mid-term and long-term, it's lose-lose. And I think it's absolutely necessary continuing with that kind of policy and really listening to those who think strategically, also from the business sector, who are looking to the global megatrends and who are trying to see their own position on the market, not only next year, but in the years to come.
Okay. Another question from the internet.
Yeah, this is, well, thank you. This is about pertaining to actually getting uptake on some of these policies. And we've been discussing, the banning of landfills, for example, but yet recycling is often not really dealt with commercially, and it's hard to get these things to be accepted. So is there somehow the panel believes that we could rebate or promote or do some sort of programs that could actually compel people and increase the traction on recycled goods?
yeah, you have various types of policies through which you can go to that direction. For example, taxing landfilling, it's one of the policy which is a soft policy leading into that direction. Or absolute precondition for all those things, it's separate collection, which I think it's important. But my point is that if we would, for example, we are now speaking hypothetically, if we would introduce the ban on landfilling, basically you are creating a very clear case financially for investing in that. Because after a certain year, there would be not anymore allowed to ban it.
But Commissioner, you're also in that case creating a cost as well. So you're an economist. Economically, yes, one has to weigh the cost against the benefit. And
I'm just saying that investing those days in infrastructure for recycling makes at least triple economic sense. It makes economic sense clearly from the recyclable economy because we don't have any other option. We need to start thinking that we have to reuse those materials because we will not be able to dig them first 100 meters under the earth surface, then 200 meters, then 300 meters. Where we will end up? Where we will end up? In the middle. So I think it's important that we understand that these bare facts. And this is pointing that this is a good investment with a good thinking, but it is, of course, initial investment. And of course, none of the directions, none of those gentlemen are doing will not move innovation, it's investment. What else? But it's investment in the direction which will in future bring the right profits. And I think that's absolutely something which that kind of philosophy would bring.
David.
Well, just to say that I absolutely agree that banning landfills is one mechanism, and it'll cause a certain kind of waste not to be produced. But it's not the only kind of waste. I think the questions you get into is, can you design a building such that its deconstruction enables you to reuse the parts immediately? Can you reuse rebar more directly rather than resmelting it and then using all the heat and everything you use and wasting a bunch of it? So I think it is a completely different mindset, the one of recycling and building things so that they can be deconstructed and reused, and that is more cost effective than sticking it in the ground or whatever. But the key thing here is design up front, such that you can deconstruct and reuse. If you design it, and this is the same for an offshore platform, anything else, I mean, the business I know, if you have not designed it to be deconstructed simply and reused, then the cost of doing so is insurmountable. So you have to swim the whole way upstream on this, and banning landfills a start, but you've got to move the whole way to the front end of this to really change the philosophy that applies to our reuse.
Absolutely true, yeah.
If I could ask the corporate members on this panel at the moment, but how would your companies decide whether and when and under what circumstances it's right for shareholders to make these kinds of life cycle investments or broader view investments? What are the key factors that your companies would look at? Yes, John.
Putting the elements of what you want to achieve in the design stage is very common in our industry. I mean, we do not only the materials designed for reuse and recycling. I mean, in the telecom industry and our industries, we have a lot of electronics waste, and we must avoid that. So we have exactly that design concept. We also do design for privacy. We do design for security. So we're already in the mindset of designing early the uses of the products or the service that you are creating. And that is the concept I think the Commissioner was telling us about, moving away from the old system of designing for only cost or designing for only efficiency. We have to introduce the element, and I think it's an education. It goes back to the engineers and the designers coming out of university. They should have that as part of the educational system. So we must put the concept of designing products for the purpose they are made, or designing services for that matter. Because it's not only environmental. It is more a societal shift. And it is doable. And many companies, I mean, the petroleum industry with the platforms have done it now for some years too. So it is doable.
Talk? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something, one example of designing services. For example, Michelin has starting with an activity of renting the tire.
Renting it.
Yeah, if you rent the tire, of course, then you as a producer are absolutely interested in that the tire would last longer. You are not interested anymore that the tire lasts less. And these are the types of philosophy which, of course, change the behavior.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Imagine if the mobile phone industry did that. Tor.
Well, perhaps a suggestion I want to offer. Clearly, I mean, we are like many other companies. I mean, we are using design for LCA performance very often when we are talking about new products and services. So, I mean, the tools are there. But of course, for those tools to be deployed in an efficient manner, it is critical to know for what kind of market requirements do we design. And that takes me back to a point I made earlier. I think any kind of bold regulatory move has to meet two requirements to be really successful. On one hand, it has to be at least pan-European. It cannot be national. And it has to be long-lasting in the sense that it has to be a commitment of all policymakers for an extended period of time, as difficult as this may be, because in many industries we are talking about infrastructure issues, and of course the time needed to change an infrastructure is measured in decades. I think as long as those two requirements are met, I think industry in general would be very happy to look at even bold regulatory moves and then respond to this with appropriate investment.
David, would you like to take a crack at that question?
I mean, at the end of the day, big companies can afford to and will do a number of things that are not required, but they believe are either the direction in which community aspirations are headed or are going to be regulated. But there's only so much you can do. I mean, I think one just has to be realistic here. If it costs twice the amount to build something which is going to be dismantled, you face a competitive threat. So I think we're very, very happy to, and indeed we do significantly, experiment with learn about what does it actually take to do these things. What does it actually take to design a building so that you can deconstruct it effectively and reuse the part? And I think there is a phase of learning through demonstrations, through pilots, about what would it really take. And the critical issue here is the wisdom of policymaking. I mean, you know, there's good examples here, but it's not easy to come up with the right policy that will stand the test of time. Will the renewable fuel standard in the US, you know, will that prove to be something that stands the test of time, or will the political heat turn up so much that they have to change it? It's very difficult to do it. So you have to get a balance between capturing information, understanding the system, understanding what you're really doing across the system, learning about what it really takes to do that, and then making the decision about the trajectory you want to put in place through the policies you deploy. So there is a process here, and bold regulation, fantastic, but make sure it's a good one. Otherwise, you end up with a bigger problem than you started off with because you create a backlash against it. So, I mean, that's just a word of caution, and I know the Commissioner would actually agree with that process. Yeah.
Okay. Edward, last question for you. Simply, what does a research university need to invest more, if that's the right term, in this kind of innovation? You're going to say more money,
well,
but yes.
Well, yes, I mean, more money, obviously, more money from all sources, more collaboration. The key to it, actually, is collaboration, whether it's with big business, with small business, with policymakers. I think that's a fundamental characteristic for this to succeed. It goes back to one of the questions about the need for an integrated approach. It's one of the Commissioner's 3 I's. It equally applies to research in this field.
Okay. Commissioner, would you like to make a concluding remark?
After 1 hour and a half, it's difficult. No, my really point, which I tried to, and basically that's also, I think your answer of there will be many answers, your question, but that will be the cost. Of course, whenever you are locked to something which you have to change, it's costly to change it. But the point is that it's unavoidable. So the cost, the real cost, it's always what will be the cost if we don't do it, and in what time we would actually need then to accommodate to that new thing which us as human beings would start better to understand. I think that now we already have enough understanding and enough knowledge that we should do some of the clear, bold corrections of our production and consumption patterns, which we have all together talked today about. Of course, they have to be done in a really well thought through ways, but simply the direction, I think, about going there, it's simply inevitable.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Commissioner. Thank you to you, ladies and gentlemen, and to the panel, and to our internet audience. Tomorrow morning on the Science Business website, you will find a report of this meeting, which we will have already published in the morning. So if you'd like to read what you just heard, it's a strange concept, but you may do so. Already on the Innovation Board website, you will find briefing papers that we put up there about the Eco-Innovation Action Plan and about the Resource Efficiency Roadmap. And thank you very much, Commissioner. And thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for hosting us.